Hi everyone. It's a great turnout we have today. I hope you don't mind my accent and can follow along today. I really must learn some Bulgarian because I have no idea what Nikolai just said about me. I hope it was good. Okay, what we're going to hear today is to take a look at client-side hacking. We have got a bit of history. We've got some demonstrations, some live hacking topics to do, and we've a message to put across. All of what we're about to do today is going to take a look at the aggressive side of security, hacking. And everything that we'll be doing will be covered and is out of the Certified Ethical Hacking course, CEH course. And with the EC Council, our goal is to promote and to educate ethical hacking. And the one question we always get, which I want to deal with at the start, is what is ethical hacking? Well, it's about having the skills and the knowledge that you need to defend infrastructure, business and jobs within Bulgaria. And we're very much of the ilk to say that for you to be able to defend your network, you need to be able to understand the risk that you face. You need to be able to understand the threats that you face, and you need to be able to countermeasure them. And what we're here today is to look at just 3 little bits on client-side hacking. Most hacking is server-side. Most attacks that target the server. And I want to really show you 3 attacks that target you. The attacks are not targeted at businesses. They're targeted at me. They're targeted at you. You're targeted at your girlfriend or boyfriend, your husband or wife. Client-side hacking. We want to take a look at that, and towards the end of the session, I hope to clarify why I think client-side hacking is going to be so important in the next 6 months, the next 12 months, the next 18 months. Later on, I'm going to introduce you to boomerang, a term that currently is 3 days old. It was first coined 3 days ago. And I want to use the term boomerang to remind us about how fast the security industry changes, how it's evolving and growing and changing every single day. So boomerang is a new threat that we want to talk about towards the end of the session, and I want to remind you of boomerangs at the very, very end. As we said, everything we're doing is off the Certified Ethical Hacking course, CEH version 7. And the goal of this course is to equip you with the skills that you need in real life to defend networks, to increase security, to make information risk minimization, to reduce your risk. So, let's get started. First of all, a little bit of theory, a little bit of background before we start. It all starts with vulnerabilities. And what we're going to do is take you for a little journey through vulnerabilities, exploits, and payloads. And we're going to do a few demos along the way of each one as we go through it, and then we'll bring it all back together towards the very end of the session. So the first thing we have is a vulnerability. The vulnerability is what we're interested in. As the old saying went, or the old TV show, movie, which is getting remade, isn't it? Superman? Superman only had 2 vulnerabilities. And if I want to be a threat to Superman, I need to exploit the vulnerabilities that he had. The 2 vulnerabilities that Superman had, kryptonite and Lois Lane. Okay? And if I have not got a piece of kryptonite, I'm not going to be a threat to Superman. So information security is about understanding the vulnerabilities your system has, keeping yourself informed of new vulnerabilities as they come out, and making sure that when you find a vulnerability, that you place a countermeasure, a control to reduce the risk. And the first thing we have is vulnerabilities. And I call this the hack equation. You find a vulnerability in code, in misconfiguration, even in policy and procedures within a business. And the vulnerability can be exploited. And the exploit leads to a hack. Remote code buffer overflows are a vulnerability. And then you can develop an exploit based on those, which becomes a hack. I'm very much of the opinion that the idea of a hack by itself doesn't really exist. It's a combination of steps that you build up. And that's the journey I want to bring you on today. Finding vulnerabilities is probably the most difficult part of information security. And if you're a student in this university, you might be studying software engineering, and you know reverse engineering code and looking for other people's bugs and faults is one of the most technically challenging and difficult areas in computing programming. Without vulnerabilities, we will never have exploits. And what I want to explain to you is how the people doing the vulnerability research have changed over the years. Without a vulnerability, there is no exploit. Without an exploit, there is no hack. For example, I want to go straight into a demonstration for you. And the demonstration is for my recently discovered vulnerability, a wireless vulnerability. I have my little D-Link wireless box sitting at the front here. And what we're going to do is we're going to crack the little D-Link box very quickly. We're going to use a vulnerability that was added to the system. Wi-Fi protected setup, WPS, Wi-Fi protected setup. You might have it at home. Who likes remembering big long wireless passwords? So to make it easy, manufacturers introduced a PIN code. And if you knew the PIN code, you could get access to the system. The vulnerability in it was Wi-Fi protected setup does not require any other authentication apart from the PIN. So what we can simply do is if we have a system that uses WPS, it doesn't matter if it's web, WPA, even WPA2. If you've Wi-Fi protected setup on it, we can brute force it. We can simply start guessing the small limited PIN. And if we guess the small limited PIN, well, the access point might lock us out. So what we need to do is we need to change our MAC address and change our IP address and continue to try to guess. Now the attack itself can last up to 15 hours. How long have you got tonight? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start the attack off, have a look at it, and then we will let it run. The attack itself is guaranteed to work because it tries every permutation and combination of WPS PIN available. And again, Wi-Fi protected setup has been out for several years. This vulnerability was first noted in January 2011, just January past. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first demo today. Okay. So what we're going to do is take a look at the demo, cracking WPS with a little tool called Reaver. Okay. I've been told to take the microphone up a little bit more. In no hand. This one's on as well. So what we'll do is we'll jump in. Now, please be warned, I'm going to try some live demos today. The live demos have all been rehearsed, practiced, but they are live demos. Let's see what happens. Okay. This is my little backpack or 2 release, and what we have connected to it through VMware is a little Realtek adapter. And the adapter is quite important. Only certain chipsets will do. And this is a little alpha box here that we're going to use. And what we can do is we can see if it's connected. We can see W0 across the bottom, WLAN 0 is the wireless access device here. What we're going to do, we're going to bring the device down, okay? We're going to do an IF config for WLAN 0, and we're going to bring the connector down. Okay? That means it's taken offline at the moment. Now what I need to do is to change the mode of the connector. So I'm going to turn it into promiscuous mode, and I need a special driver, and I'm going to use ERM1NG. ERM1 will allow my little device to capture all wireless traffic that I can see at the moment. So what I'm going to do is simply start WLAN 0 on the ERM1NG. And we can see that the driver's been identified. We can see a couple processes that may cause problems. And if we give it a few seconds, what we should see, there we go. Monitor mode enabled on MON0. If I simply run another IF config, you'll notice we now have a brand new virtual adapter, MON0. You'll notice as well that MON0 is run on unspecified mode, and you'll notice that the hardware address is quite strange. Once you do that, what we need to do is detect all the wireless devices in the local area. So what I'm simply going to do is an arrow dump, a new generation, NG, and I'm going to run the arrow dump against the MON-G interface. And what it should now happen is my device is now scanning for all the beacons, access points, and if your phones go Wi-Fi, turn Wi-Fi coming up. Now let me just slightly reduce the zoom on this because I can't see the whole screen. Let me just change the zoom out a little bit. Okay, I'm opening this window because it needs the device to be over here. And can you see the left-hand side? The reason why Control C to stop is because I needed to detect this little device at the front. This is our target system. So the target system is called from the CEH Wi-Fi. And to attack the system, I need the base station ID. And I'm going to copy the base station ID, if I can use it. Which obviously I can't. There we go. And we're going to copy that. We need that for the next part. The next part is surprisingly easy. We've selected a device that we wish to target. We've set the network in. So we simply need to use the Reaver tool. The Reaver tool was released in January 2011 as a proof of concept that this attack can actually work. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the interface MON0, and we're going to target the base station ID that we've just copied. When we go and run this, you can see his little didn't do a good enough job. So we'll actually say that the vulnerability is design flaw. The pin is too small. It allows you to repeatedly guess it and to go through as often as you like. The surprising thing that I always find is a Wi-Fi protected setup been available for what, 3-4 years? But this vulnerability was only discovered until Reaver was only released in January. So you see, vulnerability research, looking at devices that are already out there, is extremely important to help us secure the environment. The countermeasure against this is quite easy. Don't use Wi-Fi protected setup. Make sure you're WPA2, and make sure you have both a long password and a random password. WEP can be correct. WPA can be correct. WPA2 can also be cracked. You do require around about 100,000 servers to do it, which of course you can easily buy for a short period of Amazon on their dynamic computing cloud. So there's always ways around it. WPF, very vulnerable. What are we getting on? Well, you can see it's going to take some considerable length of time. The point of this demo was not to get the key straight away, because it's never going to happen. 15 to 20 hours. The goal of this was to show you how a vulnerability can sit on a system for 2 or 3 years before somebody discovers it. And when you discover the vulnerability, the exploit is really rather easy. So the first thing we have is vulnerability discovery, vulnerability research. And vulnerability research is a huge area in ethical hacking. There's a large number of companies, researchers, and universities involved very much in security research and watching to see can they find the next vulnerability. So that's simply the first demo. We have 3 demos in total. Let me go. And what I am going to do is there's a lovely little paper on Reaver. If you simply Google for the word Reaver, you'll find a little paper, a white paper on it with a full detailed explanation. The code, funny enough, is available from Google Code. The code.google.com and Reaver is available for the download. Let's go back to the slide. So, that was cracking WPS with Reaver. The goal of it was to show you how a vulnerability can sit undetected, but when somebody does the correct research, when someone's taken the trouble to learn how it should work, it's quite easy to see the flaws in the design of the system. Once we have a vulnerability, the next stage is exploit development. The little tool Reaver didn't take too long to write. You can see how simple it was. But many exploits are much more complicated. Vulnerabilities lead to exploits. Now, the goal of industry, the goal of ethical hackers, is to find the vulnerabilities before the black hats, before the criminals find them. And what we do is we have usual channels. We have channels that we can safely report vulnerabilities to. Okay? cve.micro.org, US CERT, NVD. These are websites that you can go through and report vulnerabilities. The vulnerabilities are closely controlled because what we don't want to happen is we don't want the hacker to find the vulnerability first. Because if the hacker finds the vulnerability, they can produce an exploit. An exploit that has no countermeasure. An exploit that has no patch. A 0-day. A 0-day exploit is an exploit that we don't know about until the exploit is available on the internet and is being deployed. There are many different types of exploits, and the exploits, these are the ones that make the news headlines. Stack overflows, heap corruptions, integers, race conditions, SQL injections, these are exploits. But you know what? They're not dangerous. Because an exploit is nothing more than a delivery mechanism for the dangerous part. I always like comparing it to a missile system, an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile. A missile is not actually dangerous. A missile simply delivers the dangerous payload. The exploit delivers our payload. A remote code buffer overflow is only really dangerous if it has a payload. A SQL injection is only dangerous if the SQL code it is injecting is dangerous. A cross-site script is only dangerous if the script it delivers is dangerous. So exploits are very important, and they allow us to safely deliver our payload. The exploit that probably you know most about, the exploit that you hear talked about most of the time, is a remote code buffer overflow. And the reason why it's such a great exploit, well, the name gives it away. We can run it remotely, which means my payload can be delivered from Sophia to any machine in the world that has a vulnerability on that particular service on that particular open port. If you want to provide web services, you must open your web service ports. If you want email, you must open your SMTP 25. And if your SMTP server has a vulnerability and a security researcher didn't find it, because if a security researcher found it, you'd have a patch. If the vulnerability was discovered by a black hat, then the exploit might be made available, and you have no protection from it. A remote control overflow allows me here to deliver my dangerous payload to a machine on the far side of the world, given the right conditions. So what we're going to take a look at is an old buffer overflow. It's a very reliable one. Okay? It's Microsoft Server's Relative Path Stack Corruption. It's a Net API 32 DLL issue. Okay? There actually is an MS number below it, MS08067. Those numbers indicate that there's a patch available for it. The countermeasure for this one's very obvious, isn't it? Proper patch management and vulnerability scanning. But if you have a new vulnerability, you may not have a patch deployed in time. So let's go in. We're going to jump systems. And we're going to go in and we're going to take a look at this. This is going to be a Metasploit demo. Let me go in and have a look. I want to mix it up a little bit. So we're going to use a Windows XP pen test workstation. This is going to become my hacker box. My hacker box is sitting here. And I'm on 192.168.1.2. The target for the lab will be this remote computer. I know it's all in the one machine, but it is a virtually remote computer. And this machine is a Windows Domain Controller Server 2003. This machine that I'm targeting should be 1.10. So what we have is our target being 1.10, our hacker box being 1.2. When we go and look at this, we're going to get a little bit of help from Metasploit. Metasploit is released as an educational tool. In actual fact, it is used by a majority of the internet. It is used to deploy live attacks today. The thing about Metasploit is that they only release updates that are at least 6 months old. So they don't release the very latest hacks. But again, it's quite easy to obtain them. Please, if you want to play with Metasploit, it's free to download. It's a very good educational tool, but never ever run it on your network. You're taking open source code from the internet, and you truly have no idea what it does. Okay, so it's not a valid tool to use in a pen test, and it is not a valid tool to use internally. What we have in this particular version is 716 exploits. And there are many, many different types of exploits. That means 716 vulnerabilities were discovered and exploits were. Without the vulnerability, there is no exploit. So if we go in and look, I'm going to target server messaging box. This is Windows Server File Share, port 139 and 445. And the one we're going to pick is going to be an MS8067. It's the Net API one. We'll let that load. What we now get is a nice friendly help screen. We get a complete description of what the vulnerability is, and we even get given these. This is the CVE number. The CVE is a database of all known vulnerabilities supported by the US government. When you report a vulnerability, you report it to an organization in America called cve.micro.org. And cve.micro.org gives each vulnerability a number and tracks it, proves that it's real, and tracks the vulnerability. That means that it's easy to find the patch, because if you look at the vulnerability on the internet, you'll find the patch is widely available. That's very important for us to track the vulnerabilities to make sure each vulnerability we find has got a correct countermeasure available. We go down to the next step, which is simply selecting the target. This is a process you would have done prior to the attack. We're going to select a Windows 2003 Service Pack 1 English. The interesting little bit behind it is the NX. NX is a technology for trying to prevent buffer overflows. It's more familiarly called the Intel name, which is DEP, D-E-P, Data Execute Prevent. This is hardware buffer overflow prevention. Buffer overflow prevention that has been built in to the CPUs and the operating systems that we now use, which is really actually a rather silly countermeasure, because all buffer overflows stem from the same single issue: bad programming. And if we simply improved the programming, we would have less buffer overflows. So I've selected my target, I go down the list, and this is my payload. The next bit we're going to do, we're going to look at payloads in more detail. But the payload is actually the dangerous part. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a remote shell. The most basic payload I have, I've got some very advanced payloads. And the next demo we will do a demo of a much more advanced payload. So what we're going to do is we pick the payload. We now need to feed the system with our final targeting data. And we can see 445 is the net BIOS port we're going to attack. 444 is the listening port we're going to connect to. And we simply put in the IP address of our target system, 192.168.1.10. Okay? Once we do that, we're actually ready to launch our attack. What will now happen is that we will write, by pressing run in console, we will write a Ruby attack script. Metasploit will do that for us. The script will have a vulnerability, the buffer overflow, which we will then use to deliver a remote shell. A remote shell is a command prompt that I want the remote computer to give to me. So if this works, I should obtain a command prompt on the target system with the same privilege as the service that it compromised. Your Windows infrastructure, you'll know that the default service permission is local system. Local system in Windows is higher than administrator. Local system is root. So it's equivalent of running all your daemons as root if you're Linux. Okay? So when we get this, we're going to hit run. It's going to write the script. It's going to launch the attack. If it works, I get a command prompt. Let's see. So it's writing the script. It's running the script. It's running. It's boom. Command prompt. That machine could be anywhere. Now, of course, I did port 445, and it's unlikely you'll get port 445 on the internet. But vulnerabilities come up in IIS, Apache. They come up in SendMail and Exchange. They come up with ports that you have to open to allow the internet to work. If you want the internet name resolution to work, you've got to open port 53. You don't have a choice. Open ports have to be open. And if a vulnerability exists on that open port, an exploit can be launched against it. Now, we're not finished yet because the fun's only starting. All I have is a command prompt. So what I'll do is go to the bottom of the screen. I know it's very small and hard to see. And I'm going to type in netuser /add DNS space password. And what should happen is I've just created a user account on the remote computer because my permission is higher than the local administrator. I still can't access the remote computer, so I jump on to my net group command. My net group I'm going to use for the group domain admin. And if my typing's okay, because I'm finding it hard to see but keeping my head to the microphone, if my typing's okay, I can now go and add the user DNS. What do I have now? Well, should we go and find out? This is the machine that we ran the compromise against. This is the machine got the command prompt on. And if I go and send a Control-Alt-Delete, I don't need to log on as administrator anymore because I am administrator. The box is mine. By the way, I actually think the smartest bit, why DNS as a username? Because it's going to appear in all the logs. DNS logged on, DNS did this, DNS did that. And DNS, in my opinion, is one of the most misconfigured protocols in modern IT. And what we're trying to do is to obfuscate, hide, or attack a little bit. The point of this was the delivery mechanism. All the buffer overflow did was deliver the command prompt. The buffer overflow itself was not actually very dangerous. What was dangerous? The fact that I got a command prompt. Buffer overflows are exploits. The countermeasure to an exploit is a patch. And the race is, can we find a vulnerability before they can? We being the white hats, they being the black hats. If we can find the vulnerability and patch it, that can't be done. And if you look up MS08067, you'll find the patch has been available for quite a long while. But it's a concept that we want to try to sell you. Let's go in and have a look. Let's go back into the slide. So, there we go. So that was on remote code buffer overflows. Now, we use the payload, I'm going to tell you is the payload is the dangerous part. The payload that I deliberately picked was the simplest code that we possibly can have. What's simpler than a bash shell? What's simpler than a command prompt? The payloads, however, can be much, much more complicated than the ones that we have. The payload is actually the dangerous part of the attack. Shell is what I've done. Reverse shell is what I would do in real life. Because my connection went inbound, the reverse shell goes out. Your firewall might be quite secure coming in, but how much security does it have going out? And of course, even if it's secure outbound, we can put our attack inside a protocol like HTTP or HTTPS. I can deliver a command prompt. I can even deliver VNC. VNC is like terminal services. It's a remote desktop. You get keyboard, video, and mouse. And you can deliver that inside HTTPS. So the payloads really are extremely important. The pinnacle of payloads, the ultimate payload, in my opinion, is the botnet payload. And one of the biggest issues we face at the moment is the botnet issue. The payload this time doesn't create a user account. The payload turns your computer into a secondary victim, an unwilling participant in a remotely managed and remotely controlled system. And there are various different payloads, but in my personal opinion, the botnet payload is one of the most dangerous. And to sort of try to convince you of this, we're going to do a little botnet payload demo right now. From a little botnet called Shark. I have to be quite careful when I'm doing these, and I do realize that the tools that I'm using are out of date. And I do that for a particular reason. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and see if we did that remote code buffer overflow, Could we get a better payload? Could we change the payload to give us many more features? What happens if we're very successful? What happens if we manage to compromise 100 computers? 1,000 computers? What happens if we compromise 100,000 machines? Are you going to have 100,000 command prompts on your desktop? So what we need is we need a way of managing and controlling these systems. So the botnet has two parts to it. The payload that goes in the victim, but just as importantly, a command and control center. And the command and control center is actually based on a military model. So we don't send orders to foot soldiers. We send orders to generals who send them down to sergeants who send them down to foot soldiers. And of course what I'm doing is removing myself from the attack, removing the likelihood of getting caught. Okay? Now I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about botnets later on. So let's go straight in for the third demo. We're going to do a botnet demo. Okay, so botnet demo is going to be done using shards. And we're going to do this manually. We've already seen a deployment mechanism. We've already seen overflow. So this is my pen test workstation. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to reboot the server because we messed about with it. We hack a server. You can obviously cause some damage. If in doubt, outs the box, isn't that what Microsoft says? Let's go back in again. What I'm doing here is I'm going to go into Shark. Let's launch Shark server. This, I want you to look at it. Look how professional it looks. It doesn't look like backtrack. It's not a command line. It's got GUI. And I'm going to come back to why it has a GUI and why it looks so good in a little while. But this is my Shark. And what I'm going to do in my Shark is I'm going to create a new server package. This is new payload. And I'm going to call my payload, we'll call it Sean's demo. And what we now have is a massive number of advanced choices. And the first choice I've got to do is to put in the IP address of my listening computer. This is going to become my botnet control computer, which is me. So, okay, just because I'm paranoid when I'm doing this, just wanted to make sure. So my machine is 192.168.1.2. I need a port to listen on. It's suggesting 60123, just some random port. My system, let's test it, has now got a listening port so that a botnet computer, a computer that I compromise, can come back and connect to me. And you'll notice that I'm only connecting once every 4 seconds. The reason why I connect once every 4 seconds, it's much harder to trace computers if you don't leave the connection open. It's the same as every spy movie you've ever watched when you're trying to trace a telephone call. If you do a short phone call, it's much harder to trace. There are many, many advanced choices in this particular system. We can install it permanently. We can run startup programs. We can have install events happen. And what I'm going to do, just for a bit of fun, if the payload works, I'm going to make Notepad jump on the screen, just so as we know it's working. What I can also do is add in additional payloads. I can even go and blacklist. Blacklist is an advanced payload option. Do you know when you get your malware infection from the internet and you can't run Task Manager and you can't open a command prompt and you can't shut your computer down and nothing works? The technical name for that is blacklisting. And we can blacklist whatever we want. We can permanently disable your antivirus. We can permanently disable your firewall. I quite like this little choice. If you're a vulnerability researcher and you find this package, you'll want to debug it. You'll want to reverse engineer it. You'll want to take it apart. So what we have is anti-debugging technology. If it thinks you're trying to debug it, it implodes. It securely erases itself, making it more difficult to go through the code to find out what it is. Of course, I'm running VMware, so if I don't remove that box, it'll detect the fact I'm running VMware, and instead of the attack working, it'll simply self-destruct, trying to leave no evidence behind. Now, when I go down, this gets really good. These are my stealth options, and you'll notice that I'm going to make this a visible server. If this package works correctly, you don't see anything. I want to be able to show you it's working, so we're going to leave it on visible, but we could turn it to hidden. We also have a rather cool firewall bypass, which is quite technical. It allows me to connect to the DLL of your default browser and do a HTTPS encapsulated session. What does that mean? If you look at the network traffic leaving the computer, all you see is HTTPS traffic. Inside the encrypted HTTPS traffic is my botnet traffic. And again, we need no software. We simply look at the default browser and we connect to the DLL, the default browser, and we use the default browser setting. There's even advanced choices because this package encrypts itself and encrypts the communication. And when we're ready, we compile our new attack. So we're going to call this Sean's demo, and we're going to hit the compile. And does it compile correctly? You can see it's successfully compiled. Now, what we could do is we could use our local buffer to deploy this attack. But I want to go and test it and just show you what the payload can do because we've already seen our remote code execution. Let me just test it. Do you see the pop notepad? And do you see the little remove server button? You can get rid of the remove server button, obviously. So I tested it. It looks as if it's working. So what I need to do now is I need to deliver it to my target. And I'm going to do it manually. I'm not going to do it any other way. We've got a limited amount of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down, and because I'm very paranoid, I'm going to make sure my antivirus is turned off. Otherwise, we're going to have no fun. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste it onto my real computer. And from my real computer, I'm going to put it onto the DC. So I want to hack the domain controller. Oh, that wasn't very good. You see what we've done to our domain controller? There's it there, ready to go. I need to log on to the domain controller, so this is a social engineering attack, if you like. Let me log on as administrator. Okay, so we could run it remotely. We could include this package in Metasploit, but we're just trying to do a very quick demo. So let's see if it's ready yet. It's not booted yet. And what I need to do is to get this attack onto the desktop. So we've done a manual delivery. So I'm going to run this on the server. And what we should see is come on, don't play silly buggers. What we should see is we should see Notepad and the little demo server option open. Can you see what's happening? It's successfully deployed on the XP machine, but it's not successfully deploying on the DC. The likelihood is that the last attack has made a permanent configuration change that's stopping this attack working. So, no harm. It's not as good a demo, but let me run this on this particular system. Oops, sorry, for some reason, my email's still open there. So look, it could have worked on the DC, but we've run the attack on this computer. And what you can you see the little botnet control system? And can you see that it's a pen test? Can you see it thinks I'm in the United Kingdom? And if I double click it, this is the sharp payload. I can do a massive amount of things. I don't need a command prompt anymore because I can steal the CD keys off the remote computer. I can run a process manager, server manager, file manager, registry editor. I can edit the registry of the machine on the far side of the world with the package. I can go and I can search files, open ports. I can do a farming attack by redirecting the DNS. So if I want to farm a bank, I can do a DNS attack that allows me to redirect the traffic. But the best one is the surveillance choices, because I can turn the video camera on and the microphone on the remote computer and watch and listen to whatever you're doing. And if we're lucky, it won't even turn the little red light on front of the video camera on for you. You can see this payload is much more advanced. Finally, I can have some complicated options, such as my DOS shell, so I can get my command prompt if I want it, and I can also turn the remote computer into a SOC 4 proxy. That's an anonymous proxy server that would allow me to stage another attack. So if I'm going to go and do a real attack, I want to remain anonymous, and I can turn this machine, this zombie, into my own personal anonymous computer. So you can see what we've done is we built on the payload. And the payload is really the bit that gives you the capability of being dangerous. It's the bit that you need to be wary of. Let me jump back in again now, this slide. So, what we just did was a Shark Botnet demo. A Shark Botnet demo. The framework that we're using was Metasploit. Frameworks are very important. Frameworks automate it. Frameworks make it easy for me to do. The buffer overflow was a Metasploit framework overflow. If it wasn't for the framework, we would have to do a lot of coding, a lot of scripting. It would be much more difficult to do the attack. So the framework's making it much easier for us. Writing the attack itself is okay if you're a coder. If you're not a coder, it's much more difficult. So what we've done is taken a look through the vulnerability, exploit and payload, delivery and deployment. There are lots of different frameworks available. Metasploit is what we call an underground framework, but of course there are commercial frameworks available as well. Things like Canvas, Core Impact. We would usually call them pen test tools, but really all a pen test tool is a commercial version of a hacking framework. Okay? And that's just a summary of the first little thing. The problem, of course, is that these tools are out there on the internet. It just takes a quick Google for vulnerability to find the vulnerability. If you know what the vulnerability is on a target system, a quick Google will give you an exploit. If you find an exploit for the target system, you can nearly guarantee that you can put it into Metasploit. And the problem is that the temptation, instead of practicing this in a lab, in a safe environment, the temptation is to go onto the internet and to run. And that's the problem that we face every day. If you give you a weapon, what's the temptation? The temptation is to try the weapon out to see does it work. And that's why hacking is such a prominent issue at the moment. It's easy to do, and there's nothing really stopping you from doing it. Now, there's one last demo, and the last demo was in a little thing called SET, because I want to show you client-side hacking. So I want to show you how we can take all of these things, vulnerabilities, exploits, payloads, and frameworks, and how we can turn them around and use them against you. And we're going to take a little look at something that's really rather dangerous. SET, the Social Engineering Toolkit. Okay? So let's go and take a little look at our SET tool and see can we get this one to work. The SET tool is run inside Backtrack. And what we're able to do in Backtrack is have lots and lots of different exploit tools. And I'm going to run a little SET. And you can see that it's simply coming up and offering me a menu of choices. Where do you see what the output is? I'm going to do a social engineering attack. I'm going to do a website attack. I'm going to use a Metasploit browser exploit because set plugs into Metasploit, giving me all the power of all the different Metasploit options. Now this is where it gets really dangerous. We have the built-in capability of going to any live website and creating a cloned version. We can go and pick Facebook. We can pick Hotmail. We can pick Gmail. We can pick the Bank of Bulgaria. We are not connected to the internet, so we're just going to use a predefined template. Now I need my IP address. The IP address of this computer should be 1.10. I don't want to get a demo wrong, so I'm just going to do, sorry, an IF config. And we should find that our network is on 1.1. You see, I did get that wrong. I thought it was 1.10. So 192.168.1.10. It already has cloned websites for Gmail, Hotmail, Facebook, and Twitter. I quite like the Gmail option, so I'm going to select template 2, and we're going to create a cloned Gmail site. This is where you need a little bit more technical knowledge, because these are the exploits that I can put iframes of our cloned Gmail page. And what I'm going to risk is I'm going to risk 29. 29 doesn't do an exploit. It puts all the exploits on the page. It's sort of like a shotgun approach. If one doesn't work, maybe one of the other 28 will. Okay? This is the payload. And again, I'm going to pick a very simple little payload, just the Windows shell reverse. The port 443 is fine. And we're now loading, we're loading a Java web brick. A Java web brick is an Apache server with my PHP, or with PHP and MySQL. And we're going to run a complete server infrastructure in Java. When it's ready, here we go. Where do you see it loading each one of the individual attacks? Can you see all the different attacks, all the payloads being loaded? So we're not just going to have one payload on it. We need 27 exploits on the one page. Okay, and this is why it's going to take a little while to run. Sometimes it does crash. 27 is a bit ambitious. But let's see, do we get it? There we go, it actually works. So, I go to the victim machine. This machine will now become my victim machine. So let me close down Metasploit. And what we're going to do is we remove the server, is we're going to go and you have to redirect people. Now, we could do a DNS poison. A DNS poison intercepts the request when I type in www.gmail.com, and it redirects you to my server. Now, instead of doing a DNS poisoning, I'm simply going to go to the IP address. So 192.168.1.1. Yep, 192.168.1.1. What will open when I hit this? Well, all hell's going to open. But before all hell gets loose, it should look like Gmail. Now, it'll take a little while to work. Let me jump into Backtrack, and can you see that Backtrack has found 25 exploit modules, and it's getting the server. Can you see the server started? Oh, browser autopawn. This is what the attack's called. So what we can now do with a browser autopawn is see, did we get a session? I'm going to do a session list. Oh, we haven't got an active session yet. Okay, let's have a wee look. I might need to hit refresh. Okay, don't forget there's multiple attacks on the one page. If one attack doesn't work, another attack we hope will work. Let's go back into this one. Can you see that? Can you see now there's a process of exceptions? Let's see, did that work? Oh, still no active sessions. So again, what we're doing is we're iterating through each one of the 27 exploits, or 25 it is, 25 exploits that we have. And if we get one to work, that should work, it's fully tested. Okay, what we should get is session. We're sitting waiting for a session to drop back in again. Just to try to give it a little kick, I'm going to kill the browser and open it again. Come on, I'd like to see a browser session open. Let's go and see, can we open the page? You can see this time there appears to be an issue because Gmail's not opening that quickly. Let's go into our backtrack box and see what's happening. Okay, no active sessions. It doesn't look too good to me. It's still working, but I've got no active sessions. 192.168.1.1. Come on. Nope. Now, if this doesn't work, I will reset the snapshot and we will try it again, because this is a good demo, and I want this demo to work for you. Now, can you see that the servers become unresponsive? One of the attacks that we tried to launch has caused the Apache server on the Linux box more than likely to hang. We tried to load 25 attacks on the one system, and it hasn't quite worked. No problem. We're not going to give up this yet. I want this attack to work. So what we're going to do, because I'm paranoid, is we're going to revert to snapshot. That will reset the XP machine. And I'm going to go into my backtrack, and I'm going to kill the terminal. Okay. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to reboot my backtrack box. I'll give you a chance to see the backtrack box starting again. Backtrack's an open source disto, so you can download it for free. You can update it for free. And it contains at least 1,000 privileged hacking tools in the world today. It is, of course, an educational research tool. So we wait for backtrack to bounce. We're also bouncing at the same time our little SP box. We're resetting it. Let me log in. I'm going to start a next Windows term. That's my backtrack up and running. And I need to configure the network card again. Okay, so it's E4 1. And it was 1.1, wasn't it? Okay. Let me just make sure I can ping my target. 192.168.1.2. Oh, the target's not back yet. Oh, the target is back. More than likely the target IP address is incorrect. Let me go and make sure the target's on the same subnet. And we'll try this one once more. You can see it's on the wrong subnet there. So let me go in and do 1.2, and I don't need anything else. So if we close that, we should get, there we go, we get a reply now. Cool. So we get a second go at doing our set. So let's run through exactly the same thing again, but we're going to do it slightly quicker this time. It's an exploit tool, it's a social engineering tool set. And we're going to run it. We're going to do a social engineering attack, a website attack, a Metasploit attack. We're going to do a website template. My IP address is 192.168.1.1. We're going to do Gmail again. We're going to do an auto-pawn again. Okay? And we're going to do, well, let's drop an easy one. Okay? Could use a meta-printer. We'll run the easy one. The shell. The port, let me just try a different port. 12345. I'm waiting for it to load once more. We'll have one more go at it. Of obviously before a session like this, we would tend to practice just once or twice before doing it. But then again, you should never play with computers at live demos, should you? Test workstation is sitting ready. Let me go and open the Internet Explorer for that. And we'll go and we'll get ready 192.168.1.1. Let's make sure my server's ready. Here we go. Server started. I want to go with set finishes. These are each one of the 25 valid payloads loading. Once it gets to the end, we'll try one more. And there we go. Let's jump into the XP box. Let's see what happens this time. Well, you can see Gmail is there. You can see it's downloading stuff across the bottom of the screen. If we go into backtrack, oh, there, much better. Can you see there's much more action this time? And one session opened. There you go. It is worth repeating a demo every so often. What we've actually done, bingo, is we have managed to drop a page into the remote computer using nothing more than an AutoPawn browser. So the browser has downloaded the code. It's interactive one. Okay? And I'm on. How can I prove to you I'm on? I can do. And of course, if you were paying attention to the IP addresses, you'll realize this is remote computer. 192.168.1.2. And this is a meta-purter payload. The meta-purter payload is a much more comprehensive payload than simply the command prompt. So you can see we've taken a vulnerability in a browser, we've created 25 exploits of 25 vulnerabilities, and we've used a framework to automate it to target you. These can be targeted at your iPhone, they can be targeted at your Android, they can be targeted at your laptop. A keen place to find one of these in Sofia today is a coffee shop, a train station, a hotel, and my favorite, a university. Okay? Because there's wireless networks out there that you connect to that you can be easily redirected and spoofed onto. Okay. So that demo took a little longer than I expected, but you can see that it is actually worth continuing on sometimes and practicing and having a second go. So, is that it? Not quite. Because all I've done so far is show you 3 random demos. What I'd like to do is to try to tie it back together again, because I think there's a very important message behind this. See, one of the fields that I work in is cyber warfare. And I consult with agencies, military and law enforcement to improve what's known as their capability. And I'd like to share with you why what we've just seen is nothing compared to what we're going to see in the next 6, 12, and 18 months. Because I started this session by saying that security is evolving and changing constantly. What we really have just entered is an arms race. I did steal this out of Wikipedia, but I thought it's quite a good definition of what an arms race is. When 2 or more parties race for military supremacy, it results in larger numbers of weapons, superior technology, and technology escalation. The arms race has already started in this field. And it's because of security research, because we discovered vulnerability. And there's the ability in this area to make profit. And we're going to take the need of governments to retaliate and the needs of big business to make money, and we're going to mix those two explosive things together, and we end up with an arms race. We've just entered the dawn of it. Cyber warfare is not the stuff of science fiction. Cyber warfare attacks are deployed every single hour. There are operatives in Afghanistan deploying cyber warfare attacks right now against Al-Qaeda. I know that for a fact. So what I want to do you is to take you through a quick storyline about why this should influence you, why this should be impact. Okay? You see, when we have weapons races, arms races in the past, the human race has always taken careful consideration to stop weapons being proliferated to everybody. We don't live in America, so I know I don't have to risk getting shot here today, no matter what I say. Because we don't carry arms in Europe, do we? The problem is, however, that when a soldier leaves the army, you take their gun off them. When a sailor leaves the Navy, you take his ship off him. When a pilot leaves the Air Force, you take his plane off him. What do you take off somebody that you've been training for 10 or 15 years in cyber warfare? Cyber warfare weaponry is knowledge. And if you train somebody in it, what do you do with them when they leave? This is all about risk management, and it's all about understanding threats. And if you work in a business, you know that your job in information security is not hacking, it's not ethical hacking. Your job is to mitigate and control risk. And in order to mitigate and control risk, you have to understand the threat landscape. The threat landscape is, what are these attacks? What attacks are going to get deployed against you, your network, and your system today, tomorrow, next week? One thing I want to convince you in the next 5 or 10 minutes, everything is about to change. So let me take you on a quick journey from the start of hacking to where we are today, and I'm going to leave you with a question. Where will we be tomorrow? So, in the beginning, 4 phases of hacking. Okay? And this is about the evolution of it. And we're going to take a look at these 4 phases of hacking. These are my words. We're going to take a look at hobbyists, security research, criminal gangs, and finally cyber warfare. Phase 1 was the hobbyist. Okay? Kevin Mitnick, of course, very famous now. Comrade, maybe not as much. But these are people who were hobbyist hackers who became infamous because they discovered vulnerabilities. And once they discovered the vulnerabilities, they exploited them. They hadn't got many skills. They hadn't got much knowledge. But they were still able to make an impact. Hobbyists, black hats, are hackers that we've been facing for years. But they're individuals, they're people who do this because they like it. It's the stereotypical guy in the basement trying to find the next vulnerability. We then changed to phase 2. Phase 2 brought in big business. Big business seen money to be made. Because if they could find the vulnerabilities before the hacker, they could charge for them. They could charge quite a bit. So what we have is large companies spending massive amounts of money. HP Fortify is one of the world's largest security research companies. They have 25,000 people doing nothing but vulnerability research. 25,000 full-time jobs dedicated to vulnerability research. Why? Do they want to make your network safer? They want to make money. And there's money to be made in finding vulnerabilities. We now have companies investing money, so the vulnerabilities we're finding are much better. They're much more complicated. We're finding more detailed vulnerabilities. Then phase 3 started. Last year, 431 million people were victims of cybercrime. $388 billion was the cost. That's not a global figure. That figure only comes from 24 countries. There are 24 countries in the world that monitor $388 billion on cybercrime just in 2011 and just in 24 countries. The Russian criminals raised $4 billion last year. My reliable source is the popular website. I'm sure you all visit it, Mafia Today. I just discovered it when I was doing the research. There actually is a website called Mafia Today. And these were the statistics from the Mafia Today website. Look at them. Okay? Most lucrative form was online fraud. UK. These are the UK stats. I'm obviously from the UK. Okay? Last year, 27 billion. 21 for business, 22 to government, 3.1 billion to citizens. I would like to think that my personal security is quite tight. I take it rather seriously. I got £7,226 removed from my bank account in January this year. They broke my Visa 3D secure authentication on an inside job at the bank. It wasn't my fault, it was an inside job at the bank, but no matter how strong your security is, everyone is a potential victim. Cyber criminals, criminal gangs, took the process to the next stage. And why am I telling you this? Because Shark is a commercial product developed by the Russian mafia and sold. So is Zeus. And what we now have is business. We have businesses researching vulnerabilities and selling crimeware. It's called crimeware. And it's commercially developed and it's targeted at you. By the way, it can just as easily be targeted at business. But there's more money in taking €100 of each of you than trying to get €10,000 from one bank. There's more of you. And it's more profitable to do that. So we now have companies researching, investing money, and you can get a job in Russia as a hacker. And you wear a suit and tie. And you turn up at 8:30 to work. And in the morning you'll have a meeting about a new vulnerability you're researching. At lunchtime you'll have a team meeting with your project manager about your botnet you're currently managing. And in the afternoon you'll have a brainstorming session on what changes you can make to the exploits you're currently working on. Because big business are getting involved, it's a whole class, and we're moving the game on. We're making it easier, we're making it more effective, we're making it more deadly. Look at the difference between Metasploit and Shark. Metasploit is still a little bit rough around the edges. Look at the set, the social engineering toolkit. It's all Linux command line. Shark, lovely graphical user interface. Zeus, the online banking Trojan. Beautiful little GUI to help you write and to help you launch it. There's been big advancements made by crimeware. Crimeware can proudly say that they have discovered all these things. Spyware, stealth, man in the browser, expanded target, source code relays, man in the mobile, persistence, and of course the ability to create a market a commercial market out of this. And do you know what happened? Big business seen an opportunity. They seen an opportunity to make money from this. Because phase 4 is cyber warfare. We no longer have a guy in a basement writing code. We now have Boeing Lockheed spending last year $14 billion buying cyber warfare companies. Boeing Lockheed reckons by 2020 the global cyber warfare market will be worth $100 billion. And of course, there's lots of examples of cyber warfare starting. Serbia's NATO attack, okay, Chinese going against Belgrade. You can read a big long list of it. Cyber attackers in 2008 took out Georgia completely. Remember that in the news? Okay, cyber warfare has been going on all the time. The US military appointed its first general. They now have a cyber warfare general, and they now have a dedicated military unit. 30,000 additional troops have just been added to the American Cyber Warfare Division. That's additional. Brings the total to 65,000 soldiers. Okay. Well, that's a strange number across the top. It's quite cool, actually. Because it's the logo for the United States Cyber Command. And if you're back at shoot, you might pick it up as an MD5 hash. Okay. American Cyber Command. What we now have is things escalating every day. BBC news site, William Hague, the Foreign Secretary in the UK today, declares the UK was under cyber attack a few weeks ago. You see, you can't take a weapon off somebody. And 3 days ago, the White House made a startling admission. Obama admitted that Botnet was his work. And they also pretty much admitted that the Flame virus was a cyber warfare weapon written by the US military, delivered to Israel to run against Iran. And they just coined a brand new phrase. The phrase didn't exist before. The phrase was boomerang. And boomerang takes us back to where we started. Because the White House, 3 days ago, just warned America to expect an outbreak of a rather dangerous virus known as Flame. A virus that I believe they developed and released. A boomerang. I just thought this was interesting as well. Only 36 hours ago, Germany noticed that they have now formed a special unit to attack cyber warfare as well. What I'm trying to say is, this is an arms race. And the problem with this arms race is the weaponry falls into the wrong hands. Because the weaponry is knowledge. Knowledge and pure knowledge. And once you give somebody knowledge, you can't take it away. My question, which I said I'd leave you with, what will phase 5 be? Because there are lots of companies investing millions and millions of pounds, and you no longer have a couple of guys in a basement. You now have a dozen PhDs in a Boeing Lockheed research facility with an unlimited budget. And the tools that they develop are the tools that you are going to have to defend your network against in 6 months, in 12 months, and 18 months. So if we can't defend it now, what chance do you have in 18 months' time? That's my little bit. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to hand back over to our host again. If you liked it, look us up on LinkedIn. All of what we do is for education. And we really believe that people need to know about this. And the EC Council Certified Ethical Hacking course is a course that I believe passionately in for delivering knowledge and the skills that you need to be able to defend your network. Well, thank you.